system on the freight train that derailed last year in East Palestine, Ohio, failed to let the crew know that a wheel bearing was on fire. It continued burning as the train continued along the track for 20 miles before it finally jumped the track and the fire spread to the rest of the train. The disaster forced the evacuation of the surrounding community. Your money at this moment, the Dow Jones average down on the day right now, 267 points. The NASDAQ, on the other hand, is up 200. And our KSL weather looks like a hot day today, and then we'll see possibility of a thunderstorm tomorrow. That's next. KSL News Time, 1:02.
Attention talcum powder users. Have you had ovarian or gynecological cancer? A proposed $8 billion plan will pay those who believe they got sick from using talc products like Johnson's Baby Powder and Shower to Shower. Johnson & Johnson maintains its products are safe. You have until July 26, 2024 to vote to accept or reject the plan. For more information, visit officialtalcclaims.com or call 888-431-4056. Paid for by LLT Management, LLC.
When you use Bounce dryer sheets and your clothes look amazing, it's the sheet. Less static in your life? Yeah, it's the sheet. Smelling fresher than ever? It's the sheet. Oh, so soft fabric? Ooh la la. It's the sheet. Less wrinkles on your clothes? You know it's the sheet. Bounce dryer sheets. More freshness, more softness. Less static, less wrinkles. It's the sheet.
Utah, don't spend your summers painting year after year. Do what your neighbor Judy did. She called Rhino Shield.
After having the house painted with kind of usual house paint, I was seeing cracks appearing about every 3 years and just wasn't very satisfied with that.
Rhino Shield ceramic technology is formulated for our unique climate here in Utah and is Class 1 fire rated.
I can't speak highly enough about the Rhino Shield crew. They also were great at working with me to get the exact right color because I was very particular.
Utah, you too can have the 25-year guaranteed protection of Rhino Shield for 10% off the regular price.
I would not hesitate to call Rhino Shield, and I am just thrilled to recommend Rhino Shield to my friends and neighbors and family.
This offer is limited. Call 435-246-4466, 435-246-4466, or rhinoshieldwest.com.
Go Rhino Shield.
Email from school about the incident today.
Scary.
Tell me about it. Did you have any idea that was going on?
None. I mean, you saw Derek at the game last night, too. Did you have a clue?
No, but you know, teachers like me, parents, we don't always know as much as you guys do. Kids hear first about what's going on with other kids.
Half the time, it's rumors.
It can be hard to tell sometimes, but if you're ever concerned about a friend who's having trouble with alcohol, prescription drugs, bullying, violence, anything, you need to tell an adult. Mom or me, a teacher, coach, school counselor, someone you know and trust.
Dad, no kid is gonna tell an adult about that kind of stuff.
I get it, but if we don't know, we can't help. Speaking up about a problem, that's what helping a friend is all about.
For more information, visit underagedrinking.samhsa.gov.
Traffic and weather together, brought to you by Sinclair's DinoPay app. Save up to 20 cents per gallon. Here's Ricky Mace.
A quiet drive on the Valley freeways, but we do have a crash. This is 2100 south at 3rd West. The UACPA supports certified public accountants in Utah through ongoing professional education and leadership development. Find a CPA that works for you, uacpa.org. Ricky Mace in the KSL Traffic Center.
Sunny and hot today, high near 100. A little bit cooler tomorrow and Thursday, but with a chance of thunderstorms. And right now, we're at 95 degrees with partly cloudy skies. I'm Dan Bomas from the KSL Common Spirit Health Studios. Listen online at kslnewsradio.com. We're Utah's news, traffic, and weather station.
Inside Sources. Inside Sources. America's voice of reason. Boyd Matheson on Utah's home for elevated conversation. Inside Sources on KSL News Radio.
As we look at all the political comings and goings on a day like today, it's interesting that the eyes of the nation do tend to look out to Utah, and they may even look completely to the west as we move on to the bigger picture of the 2024 election cycle. The balance of power could be decided by many of the western states, so let's look underneath the hood in terms of what does that really mean, and what does that mean for us here in the state of Utah? Let's begin.
Think you know the news of the day? Think again with Boyd Matheson on KSL News Radio.
Well, it is a big election year, and as, of course, a big election day here in the state of Utah. We'll be tracking that for you throughout the day and well into the evening tonight. Jeff Kaplan and I will anchor the desk here as we go into the evening hours, as we start getting results after the polls close at 8 p.m. You can still vote today, so still get out there and cast your vote, make your voice heard. All the election matters. Your voice makes a difference, and so that's part of the big picture piece that we're all responsible for. But I want to dig into a brilliant piece done by our friend Samuel Benson, national political correspondent for the Deseret News, talking about the Senate. We've talked a lot about the balance of power. There'll be big battles in the House of Representatives, and will the Republicans maintain control? On the Senate side, the question is, with a 51-49 margin for the Democrats, will they be able to hold serve and retain control of the Senate? Sam Benson looks at it from the Western perspective, and Samuel joins us on the line. Welcome back to the show.
Hey, thanks, Boyd. Thanks for having me.
Hey, so let's dig into some of these races in the West. The one that I've been tracking the closest, and I want to start here, and that is Montana. Jon Tester was in the Senate when I was back there as a chief of staff, very popular amongst his colleagues on both sides of the aisle, kind of a straight-shooting, straight-talker kind of guy. And give us a sense of your perception in terms of where he stands. Clearly one of those that Republicans have put a target on for a possible pickup victory in November.
Well, Montana's, as long as Tester's in the Senate, Montana is such an interesting case study on partisan politics because he's a Democrat in a red state that has really high approval ratings. But this is probably the most difficult reelect he faces in his tenure. He's facing a tough challenge over what his more conservative constituents would call his allegiance to the Biden administration. He's been a close ally with Biden on passing several key pieces of the president's kind of legislation, whether it be the infrastructure bill or gun safety legislation or things like that. But on the left, he's also kind of facing some disgruntlement from Democrats who say that he's being done too much in an election cycle to kind of cozy up with conservatives. He's kind of taken a stance against illegal immigration and spoken out against some situations in which unauthorized immigrants are committing crimes and things like that. So he's walking this really interesting tightrope to try and prove that a Democrat in a red state can continue to have success even in kind of a hyper-polarized environment in which we live.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting. A lot of people have said it's sort of the Western version of Joe Manchin in West Virginia, someone who's in a very red state, places where the former president does really well, and yet you've got these Democrats who have been very popular and very well respected. Anything, as you look to the fall for Jon Tester and Montana, anything that is kind of bubbling that might be a determining factor in that, or will this be something where the top of the ticket could make the difference in those Senate races?
Well, his Republican opponent, Tim Shea, is a really interesting individual as well. He can't seem to get out of his own way in some ways. There was an incident in which he claimed that he got a gunshot wound during his service in Afghanistan, and then later backtracked saying it came from a hike at a national park. And he keeps seeming to have these blusters that make the race about kind of his off-the-trail antics and not his policies. That said, the closer we get into November, what's going to be interesting to me is, can these two candidates separate themselves with what's happening at the national level? If Tim Shea had his way, he would just sidle up to Trump and to the presidential race and have people vote along a straight party line. Whereas what's made Tester so successful is his ability to separate national politics from the local. A lot of people in Montana, a state that's huge in terms of geographics, but quite small in terms of population, people know him and they like him, and that's where his success comes from. So if he can manage to separate himself and get people to focus on the local issues, whether it be conservation or public lands or the local economy, as opposed to national issues, that'll be in his favor.
Yeah, no question. I want to take a quick look at Nevada. I think that's another really intriguing one. Neighbors to the west of us here. Give us a little lay of the land in terms of Nevada and how that one, again, is that one where the Democrats hold serve, or is that a potential flip?
Well, the interesting thing in Nevada right now is that Jackie Rosen, who's been in the Senate been in the House and the Senate since 2016, very familiar to Republicans. Nevada's a swing state in the presidential race. So when people look to Nevada, they're talking about the presidential there, Biden's polling numbers, Trump's polling numbers. As of right now, Trump is winning by Nevada in most polls by about 4 points, whereas Jackie Rosen, the Democrat, is also leading in most polls. And so although this race is a toss-up, you see a real discrepancy between how people are voting, or at least polling in the presidential race versus how they're polling in the Senate race. What's most interesting to me right now is that Jackie Rosen is a Reformed Jew. She's the only member of the Senate who served as a president of a synagogue before serving in the Senate. Since October 7th and the Israel-Hamas war, she's kind of had to walk a very tight line with the more progressive wing of the Republican Party, with her being very staunchly pro-Israel and supportive of Israel, and a lot of people on the left, especially the progressive left, who are disappointed with that stance. That's become an issue with Biden on the presidential front. I'm not sure how big of an issue that's going to become in Senate races like this, but that's a very interesting story that I'm watching in Nevada.
Yeah, fascinating stuff, and a fantastic piece. You can check out Samuel's piece at Deseret.com, and there's some really powerful stuff in there in terms of the potential flipping of the House and the Senate in a presidential election year, which would also be a fascinating thing. Samuel, as always, great perspective, great writing. Thanks for joining us today.
Thanks, Boyd.
All right, that's Samuel Benson joining us from Deseret.com, talking about how the fate of the Senate in our nation's capital may lie right here in the West. Of course, it's Election Day here in the state of Utah. Get out and make sure your vote has been cast, your voice has been heard, because all of these things will matter as we march our way towards a pivotal 2024 election cycle. We'll continue with more coverage here throughout the afternoon and well into the evening. At KSL News Radio, we've got you covered, all things politics today, and we'll be right back.
Think again on Inside Sources with Boyd Matheson. Utah's historic primary ends tonight. Get total election coverage this week. A special edition of Jeff Kaplan's Afternoon News starting today at 3 and live results all night. Then tomorrow, get a roundup of winners and reaction to the races all morning. Your voice, your vote 2024. We have you covered on KSL News Radio.
We need Colby Jenkins. His commitment to the Constitution, fiscal responsibility, limited government, and individual liberty make him the best candidate to represent Utah's values in Washington.
The problem in Washington isn't just Democrats. Half of the Republicans in Congress vote for deficit spending, endless wars, and unconstitutional mandates. That's why we need better Republicans, like Colby Jenkins.
Paid for by the Constitutional Conservatives Fund PAC. Not authorized by any candidate or candidates committee.
The IRS deadline has come and gone. So do you owe money to the IRS? If so, you need an ally. Whether you owe the IRS $6,000 or $600,000, whether your tax problems are personal or business, the professionals at Allies Tax Relief are ready to step in and negotiate your fresh start with the IRS. Here's a happy customer of Allies Tax Relief.
Before calling Allies Tax Relief, I feared the IRS would take all of my assets. I owed them over $562,000. Thankfully, I was referred to Allies and called them for help. They ultimately saved my life from uncertainty. Allies negotiated my giant tax debt to an unbelievable $1,500. They are professionals and they fight the fight for their clients.
Allies Tax Relief will protect your assets from being seized and your paycheck from being garnished. Call right now for your free consultation. 800-296-0772. That's 800-296-0772. Or visit AlliesTaxRelief.com.
Who is the most interesting candidate for Senate? John Curtis, of course. Serving as mayor, he didn't just improve public services, he transformed Provo into one of the best-run cities in the country, all while cutting the budget, leaving with an unheard of 94% approval rating. In Congress, Curtis was named one of the most effective lawmakers. Curtis voted repeatedly to stop Washington's reckless spending and secure the border. Protecting farmers and ranchers from government overreach, he transferred more federal land to Utah than anyone else in state history. He authored legislation in Congress to hold China accountable. Now John Curtis is running for Senate. Unlike typical politicians, Curtis gets things done. Vote conservative John Curtis for U.S. Senate in the Republican primary on or before June 25th. EDF Action Votes is responsible for the content of this advertising, paid for by EDF Action Votes, edfactionvotes.org, and not authorized by any candidate or candidates committee.
A secure retirement just doesn't happen by accident. When that day comes, what's most important to you? Are you sure to have more money than month? What about unexpected medical costs? Do you want to leave something to the kids or the grandkids? I'm Jeff Jr. from Trajan Wealth, and I want you to know we specialize in these questions and can help make your retirement dream a reality with some of the highest guarantees in the business. Imagine getting up to a guaranteed 12% growth on your retirement income and up to a 30% bonus up front just for opening an account. If you have funds sitting idle in an old 401k or IRA, consider guaranteeing it to secure the peace of mind you deserve. Don't leave your financial security to chance. Take advantage of the highest guarantees I've seen in my career. Call Trajan today at 801-899-7600. That's 801-899-7600. Or visit us online at TrajanWealth.com.
Annuity guarantees are based on the claims-paying ability of the issuing insurance company.
Join the KSL Sports Zone for Hans and Scotty's Pet Adoption Day in partnership with the Humane Society of Utah and Hercules Credit Union this Tuesday from 10 to 3 at the Humane Society of Utah and Murray.
Victor deployed for the first time to Afghanistan in 2003. At 4 in the morning, my phone rang. They said, "I regret to inform you that your husband was wounded in action." Victor sustained a moderate traumatic brain injury. I was doing school full-time, and I was also then caring for Victor. One of the most important elements of caregiving is taking care of yourself. I just didn't want to forget that I also had goals and that I also had a life. What I did is I challenged Victor to meet me halfway. There are almost 6 million military and veteran caregivers across the nation. We have our own journey, and we can fulfill that journey at the same time that we are helping our loved one.
Visit aarp.org/caregiving for a free military veterans guide to navigate your caregiving journey and better care for your loved one and yourself. Brought to you by AARP and the Ad Council.
With the three things you need to know this hour, I'm Dan Bomas. First, fire did heavy damage to a fourplex in Orem overnight. Second, the NTSB has some answers now about the toxic train derailment in Ohio last year. And third, the judge in former President Trump's hush money trial is easing up now on his gag order. 95 degrees, partly cloudy in Salt Lake City. And back to Inside Sources on KSL News Radio.
Hear elevated conversation on crucial issues. Boyd Matheson on Inside Sources.
While the Senate is out of session this week, there's still a surprising amount of activity stirring things up on Capitol Hill. Politics during a presidential election year is once again causing rifts and preventing progress to pass real legislation, get to real solutions. So we want to turn to one of the best sources in all things relating to the Senate, Alexander Bolton, who, of course, is a senior staff writer for The Hill, has a great piece talking about how businesses are fuming a bit as the Democrats are blasting the Republicans for blocking corporate tax credits. That might be a think again moment for us. Alexander, welcome back to the show.
Thanks a lot for having me on the show.
Of course, usually when we talk about the Senate Republicans and tax credits or tax cuts for corporations, that usually seems to be hand in hand. But things are a little more complicated this time around. Tell us what's going on.
Well, we have a role reversal here because you have the Democrats have crafted a deal. The Senate Democrats have crafted a deal with the House Republicans to basically extend the research and development tax credit, which would allow businesses, small and mid-sized businesses, to expense those R&D inputs. And it's being blocked right now by Senate Republicans. And the Democrats say it's because Senate Republicans don't want to give Joe Biden a win 5 months before the election. And what's interesting here is you have two of the biggest business trade groups in Washington, U.S. Chamber of Commerce and Business Roundtable. They both support this bill. It passed the House. It's a compromise. It extends the research and development tax credit, which is very important to business, but it also expands the child tax credit, which is important to lower and middle income families. It also has a affordable housing tax credit. It has some disaster assistance provisions in there. So it's a multitude of things, but it's the business tax breaks that the business community really wants. And it passed with a huge margin in the House, I think 350 votes or something like that, 357 votes. And now it's being blocked by Republicans in the Senate. So you have this unusual situation where Democrats are blaming Republicans for blocking these critical tax breaks especially for businesses.
Yeah, it is a fascinating thing and has a little bit of an echo to it of some of the bipartisan work that was done by Senator Langford on some of the border security and immigration pieces earlier in the year, where you had an overwhelming victory for Republicans in the House, only to be blocked by those same Republicans in the Senate. Give us a context and maybe from some of your sources there in terms of the conversations going on between House Republican leadership and Republican leadership in the Senate.
Well, there isn't a whole lot of conversation really going on about this. I think to the extent there was a public meeting between Speaker Mike Johnson and Senate Republicans, it was actually on looking ahead to 2025 and what the Republican agenda is going to be for 2025. And they're talking about the reconciliation package. And basically, it means putting the top Republican priorities into a package that can get around the Senate filibuster, get those enacted into law. If you remember back to 2017, no one thought that Donald Trump was going to beat Hillary Clinton. Republicans were basically unprepared for what their agenda was going to be. And Trump won, shocked everybody, and then Republicans, spent really weeks and months figuring out, what do we do next? And then they pursued the ill-fated decision to try to repeal the Affordable Care Act. It didn't work out so well. So the conversation right now between Mike Johnson and the Senate Republican leadership is, what do we do for next year? Now, this tax bill that's been held up in the Senate, it does play into those discussions for next year. And I think part of the reason that Senate Republicans are holding up this tax bill right now is because they're hoping to win back the Senate majority, and they want to have a bigger hand in putting whatever that next package is going to be. So they don't want to let anyone sort of get the glory until they're back in power.
I think that's so fascinating, and I think it's an interesting look. Obviously, with the 51-49 Senate, we've been talking here on the show as we have a primary here in the state of Utah today that will determine one of those senators for the future, but also many here in the West. We're looking at Arizona, Nevada, and then, of course, John Tester has a very difficult re-elect there in Montana. As you look at that balance of power potentially shifting, would that impact how they go about this particular kind of bill, extending these tax credits, or does this become just part of a much bigger agenda moving into the next year?
Well, the thing with these tax credits, these research and development tax credits, is that it would extend the expensing provision through 2025. So, it wouldn't really affect what the discussion is in the reconciliation package or the tax package that's going to be considered in 2025, because that wouldn't go into effect until 2026 anyway. So I think that lends some credence to the Democrats' argument, or claim at least, that really it's just that Senate Republicans do not want to let Democrats have a win on taxes before the election. And that's because not only do they want to help Trump win back the White House, but they don't want Democrats to point to any accomplishments that are going to help their vulnerable incumbents like John Tester in Montana, like Sherrod Brown in Ohio.
Yeah, and those are going to be tricky states for sure for the Democrats, and there's a few that the Republicans will have to defend as well. Top of the ticket will have some influence, and so does this really come down in terms of that election year win? These are the things that always, I think, drive most Americans crazy. That will we really not do something to advance? Just on the outside chance that we might win, and we can do it a little bit different?
Well, yeah, and I think that's why the Democrats are trying to raise attention here. And I think what's interesting in my reporting is that the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, which has traditionally been a very strong ally of the Republican Party, and they're now coming out and saying that businesses are suffering tangible harm. Because interest rates are going up, they need more cash flow. They need to be able to expense or write off, these research and development costs. and that it's a matter of jobs, it's a matter of expansion, it's a matter of prosperity. And so what's interesting to me here is that you have, the Chamber of Commerce kind of, really criticizing the Republicans on the Finance Committee, like Senator Mike Crapo, the ranking Republican on Finance, for holding this package up. It's really kind of a reversal of roles from what we've seen in past years.
Yeah, it's fascinating. And do you think, you noted this in your reporting, so does it look like Majority Leader Chuck Schumer will bring this to the floor to force a vote or to create that increased tension, hoping maybe he could pick up a few of those Republicans?
Schumer really doesn't telegraph what he's going to do on the floor, and
he is good at that.
He was asked about it last week, and he said, "Look, the bill's not dead," and he says he's working with the chairman of the Finance Committee, Ron Wyden, to figure out a way forward. What I heard yesterday when I was calling my sources is that Wyden is prepared to make some concessions to Republicans in hopes of getting this bill passed. And I think the fact that you have the Chamber of Commerce and companies really putting pressure on Republicans, doing some grassroots lobbying on these Republicans back in their home states, I think it could actually spring this bill loose. So it had looked as though this bill was dead in the water, but now with the corporations putting pressure on Republicans to basically get out of their seats and do something here, we'll see if it actually makes a difference. But again, being an election year, it's always very difficult to get anything done the closer you get to the election.
Yeah, and always easy to be against things. It takes real leadership to be for things. And I think the question always comes down to, are we really going to balance that short-term political problem solving, which is just solving the political problems of the politicians, or are we really looking at the long-term national interests? And this is an area both in terms of business and in terms of that tax credit for the child tax credit that could have serious implications. As always, best reporting in the business, Alexander Bolton, senior staff writer for The Hill, and someone we always look to all things Senate. Thanks so much for making time for us today.
Thanks a lot for inviting me on.
All right. Again, that's one of the best, Alexander Bolton, senior staff writer at The Hill. You can check out his piece at thehill.com. And it is such an interesting role reversal. You've got business leaders really upset with the Republicans for blocking some corporate tax credits. The Democrats, of course, are blasting that role reversal. So we are in a little bit of a topsy-turvy world. But that's what happens. That's what happens when you're unwilling to give someone who you see as a political opponent a victory, even if the victory is in the best interest of the people that you're representing. We can debate the merits of the bill itself, but if you're just doing it on the politics, that's not leadership. We'll be right back.
It's 1:30 at KSL News Radio. I'm Dan Bomas. KSL's top story this hour, Grand County search teams looking for two people in the Steelbender off-road trail area near Moab. The Grand County Sheriff's Office says they found an abandoned UTV belonging to the pair who'd gone out for fun and didn't come back. Search and rescue teams currently searching on the ground and in the air. A house fire in Orem was apparently started by a barbecue smoker, and this did heavy damage to a fourplex at 160 West to 1000 North. Orem City Assistant Fire Chief Sean Hurst says the residents got out okay.
There was no injuries on the fire. Tenants were all able to get out on their own. We did be able to rescue 3 dogs. There was 1 cat lost in the fire.
The fire did spread to the attic, and a large portion of the roof will need to be replaced. Our top national story this hour from ABC News. The judge in former President Trump's hush money case has revised his gag order in advance of the debate with President Biden later this week. Trump will be allowed to talk about witnesses in the case and about the jury in general, but not about individual jurors or prosecutors. Trump was convicted on 34 counts in that case and faces sentencing next month. Your money at this moment, the Dow Jones average has been down all day right now, 267 points. The NASDAQ, on the other hand, is up 230 right now. And a KSL weather, hot again today. And then we have a chance of thunderstorms tomorrow and the next day. KSL News Time, 1:31.
It's a priority for us at this station to bring you all sides of a story and to talk about the news fairly, completely.
Get all the facts and be really aware. Utah's Morning News with us, Tim and Amanda.
Weekday mornings 5 to 9 on KSL News Radio.
Hey, are you ready to do something today that'll change every tomorrow for the rest of your life? For me, the one thing that changed everything was the day I began my SOTA weight loss journey. It's SOTA weight loss. SOTA stands for state-of-the-art weight loss because it is. It's state-of-the-art. It's that simple. The pounds and inches melted away. I lost 37 pounds in less than 90 days. I'm over 2.5 years down the track, and it has changed every day for me, and it will for you as well. As I always say, when it comes to your SOTA weight loss journey, there's no time to lose. There's only time to win. So start winning today. Your healthy tomorrow starts today. You'll have your own coach and nutritionist to help you every step of the way. So make the decision today that will change every day for the rest of your life. Start it at SOTA Weight Loss, state-of-the-art weight loss, SOTAweightloss.com.
Paid for by Lyman for Utah.
I really just wanted to say thank you. Thank you to everybody that's worked so hard on this campaign. Thank you to the volunteers, to the donors, people that have put up signs, people that have been out talking to their neighbors. It's been so great. I really believe that Utah is about to see unspeakable good. We are really, really close in the polls right now. If you turn out, if you'll come out and vote, if you'll get a friend to go with you, we're about to see one of the biggest upsets in Utah's political history, and I really want you to be part of it.
I'm Phil Lyman, and I approve this message.
You've been working so hard to keep your lawn and garden looking good. Maybe it's time to make your home look incredible with new window frames and double pane glass from Advanced Window Products. If you can imagine it, they can create it at their factory in Salt Lake City. Any style, any color, security enhancements to keep your family safe. All this and factory direct pricing. You're buying local and paying less. So seal up your home and reap the energy savings with Advanced Window Products, where they've been creating windows for 38 years. No subcontractors. They're not resellers. They build the windows, they install the windows, and they guarantee them for life. And right now at their summer special, get an extra $2,500 off on 10 windows or more. They offer 0% financing and even buy now, pay later. Busy season's just hitting. Call now. Advanced Window Products, $2,500 off. But you have to call 801-850-9100. That's 801-850-9100. Or go to advancedwindowsusa.com.
You trust us for news and information in your car. Now trust us at home. KSL News Radio has you covered, keeping you informed on the latest breaking news, weather, traffic, sports, and more. Listen on your Amazon Echo or Google Home device. Just say, Alexa, open KSL News Radio. Or listen on the KSL News Radio Listen app. Text the word app to 57500. KSL News Radio. We have you covered.
Traffic and weather together, brought to you by Sinclair's DinoPay app. Save up to 20 cents per gallon. And here's Ricky Meese.
Nice and quiet on the Valley freeways. No delays. We have a stalled vehicle southbound I-15 approaching the point of the mountain out of traffic. And a crash with Salt Lake City PD at the scene, California Avenue and Redwood Road. Lagoon is Utah's home for summer fun. Get all the fun and excitement at Lagoon. Great rides, games, and adventures. Open daily. Visit lagoonpark.com for hours and to purchase tickets. Ricky Meese in the KSL Traffic Center.
Sunny and hot today, a high near 100. A little cooler tomorrow and Thursday with a chance of thunderstorms. And right now, 95 degrees, partly cloudy. I'm Dan Bomas from the KSL Common Spirit Health Studios. Listen online at kslnewsradio.com. We're Utah's news, traffic, and weather station.
Inside Sources.
Inside Sources.
America's voice of reason. Boyd Matheson on Utah's home for elevated conversation. Inside Sources on KSL News Radio.
Well, as we've been covering, the Supreme Court has had a busy couple of weeks with rulings coming out every few days. And, of course, we're now to the last few days of June, and that's usually when the court checks out and goes on their break. And so it's been a very big week. They've added some days when decisions will roll out. Wednesday was going to be sort of the big last one, but they've extended that to Thursday, Friday, and possibly even one next week. And so we want to take a look at some of those rulings that are coming down, some of the impact that might have. And so, of course, we always turn to the best in the business. Kelsey Dallas, Assistant Managing Editor of the Deseret News, and someone who follows the court and gets the ins and outs and the upside downs of all of that. And Kelsey, welcome back to the show.
Thanks for having me.
I hope you got a double espresso latte or whatever that thing is that's going to keep you going for the next few days. We got a lot of big rulings coming down that are going to have impact. And I want to start with one of the biggest, which would could be very interesting if this ruling came out on Thursday, the day of that, big presidential debate thing, dealing with the former president and presidential immunity. How is that one shaping up? What are you watching for as that ruling comes?
That's a great point about the timing. If I had to guess, the Supreme Court will hold off until Friday morning or even Monday next week to release the case called Trump v. United States. This is the one about the scope of presidential immunity. It was brought by former President Donald Trump and his team of attorneys, basically saying that he shouldn't be able to be charged with alleged interference in the 2020 election because whatever he did or didn't do related to the election was part of his official duties as president and therefore should be exempt from prosecution.
Yeah, and any inklings as you look back on how that played out, the arguments that were made for and against, and some of the questions, it's as always, it's what questions do the justices ask that usually kind of tip the hand a little bit. Anything in particular that you have caught or anything in your reporting that you've seen that might give you some indication as to how the court may move on that?
My main guess, and this may not be juicy enough for you, is that the ruling, whatever form it takes, is actually not going to say much about Trump. It'll say more about the presidency as an institution, because so much of oral arguments was about what this decision in either direction would mean for the future of our country. Do we risk a future where presidents would be afraid of being prosecuted, and so they would be too timid to do what they're asked to do? Or do we risk a situation where they're so protected from consequences that they act wild and they're up to no good because they are so secure in their position and their power? So those, you might be able to guess that there were more conservative voices saying one thing and more liberal voices saying the other. But it was clear that they were thinking of the future more than they were thinking of Trump in the 2024 presidential election.
Yeah. And that's exactly why we have you on this show, because we don't need juice. we need the real stuff. And that is the real stuff. And I just want to reiterate what Kelsey just shared, because this is so important, because there is so much of the juice and the flash and the sizzle and the clickbait stuff about presidential immunity, particularly as it relates to the former president. But that is not what the court is asked to look at. It's about the future. And just as Kelsey pointed out, whether that means a president is so worried and becomes so timid, so handcuffed that they don't do the things that need to be done in the executive office, or do they become so emboldened because they feel so protected and so above the law that that's not good either. And so that's what we should be watching for. It has far less to do with the former president and much more to do with a future president of either political party. That's where the focus should be. All right, give us some sense in terms of the Relentless versus the Department of Commerce. What are we looking at there?
Yes, this is a huge case, although it's not one that the average American is going to be counting down the hours until it's decided, because it's hard to understand how it applies to your life. It doesn't have any juice, as we were just talking about, unless you really understand the workings of the federal government and what Congress is up to when it passes new policies. But basically, since the Supreme Court put something in place called the Chevron Doctrine in the 1980s, there has been deference paid to federal agencies to interpret and apply and enforce the policies that Congress passes, especially in moments where those policies are quite broad or vague. The example that always comes to my mind is the Affordable Care Act. So that gets passed. It offers a general outline of what the goal is of the policy, but then it's set on the desks of everybody at federal agencies to say, okay, you decide what pills actually have to be covered by employer health plans. Like, you decide what religious freedom protection should be in place in the Affordable Care Act. And then if those decisions are challenged in court, judges had been instructed to basically go with the federal agencies, defer to the federal agencies. And so here, the Supreme Court has a chance to say, wait a second, we don't like how this has shaken out since the 1980s. We're going to go back to a situation where it really is on Congress's plate to make all the in-the-weeds decision, because we're not going to defer to federal agencies anymore. Yeah. So it would be a big moment to say, okay, Congress has to make all these decisions.
Yes. And again, no juice required. We're about steak, not sizzle on this show. And this is one of those where this is one that always drove me crazy in Washington, because you would get a bill and there would be pages and pages and that would say, we defer or we hereby bequeath power to decide what this is, what it means, what the penalties are, and enforce the penalties to some agency. And so that does two things. One, it gives way too much power to someone who's not elected. It gives members of Congress the ability to say, oh, hey, we passed this really cool-sounding law, but if you have a problem, go talk to the agency because I didn't do the rest of it. So it gets us out of just the nice titled bills. It actually forces Congress to be accountable for doing the job they're running to be elected to do. So we actually love that this case is coming up before the Supreme Court. I'm going to sneak in one more, Kelsey, before we let you go. Any of the remaining ones that is sort of a favorite that you're keeping your eye on that might be a little under the radar?
The main one that I want to highlight is called Moyle, and that is a case out of Idaho that has to do with emergency care for pregnant women, most notably abortions. So the question there is, if a state like Idaho basically bans all abortions and doctors are liable for some sort of crime if they provide an abortion, what are they meant to do in emergency situations where federal law would say you need to do whatever you need to do to keep the pregnant woman safe, even if that means terminating the pregnancy? So it's this tension between the state level abortion bans that have popped up since 2 years ago when the Supreme Court overturned Roe v. Wade, and federal protections for just types of healthcare in emergency room settings. It'll be really interesting to see how the Supreme Court negotiates that, because just recently they upheld access to the abortion pill. And so what are they going to do in this second abortion case of the term?
Yeah, fascinating stuff. And there's even a few more that will come back and get you on Wednesday, Thursday, or Friday as these start to roll out. But, Kelsey, we appreciate you breaking those down. I think those are really crucial things. And, again, a lot of people may not have gotten up this morning and thought, oh, I need to worry about this today. But all of these things do impact us in a very real way. And that's why we got to be engaged, and that's why we bring Kelsey Dallas on to break it all down into real terms that we all can understand. Kelsey, thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
All right. Happy Supreme Court week. And Kelsey Dallas is the assistant managing editor of the Deseret News. You can check out her piece. She actually has a great piece breaking down the biggest questions that the Supreme Court still has to answer this week, including the one about the former president and presidential immunity. And I do think it's interesting that they added some decision days to the calendar. It was just scheduled that they would release the remainder of them on Wednesday. They've added Thursday and Friday for rulings to come out. And I'm pretty sure Kelsey got it right on. I think the Supreme Court will hold the decision on the former president's case until after the debate. I think it would be poor form and bad timing if it came out on Wednesday or even on Thursday, just before the current president and the former president step on the stage for a big debate. All right, that's all the happenings at the Supreme Court. We'll continue to track all of that because it does impact you. Even if you're not thinking about it, it's still impacting you. And we got to be engaged, we got to be informed so we can be better citizens and build a stronger community. We'll be right back.
We need Colby Jenkins. His commitment to the Constitution, fiscal responsibility, limited government, and individual liberty make him the best candidate to represent Utah's values in Washington.
The problem in Washington isn't just Democrats. Half of the Republicans in Congress vote for deficit spending, endless wars, and unconstitutional mandates. That's why we need better Republicans, like Colby Jenkins.
Paid for by the Constitutional Conservatives Fund PAC, not authorized by any candidate or candidates committee.
At Fisher Investments, we may seem like other money managers, but we're different.
What makes you so different than the rest of us?
We ensure clients receive unparalleled service at every step of the relationship.
Tell me more.
Our investment counselors focus on service over sales, prioritizing clients' needs.
How do you make money?
We don't sell any commission-based products. We have a simple management fee based on the value of our client's portfolio. So we do better when our clients do better.
What about client portfolios?
We get to know each client, their finances, family, health, lifestyle, and more, and then we tailor a portfolio based on their specific goals and needs.
Your clients really come first then, huh?
Yes, we make them a top priority. Our goal is helping them achieve a comfortable retirement.
Wow, maybe we are different.
At Fisher Investments, we're clearly different. Learn more at FisherInvestments.com.
Investing in securities involves the risk of loss.
And I said to myself, sit down, you're rocking the boat.
Join Utah Festival Opera and Musical Theater July 5th through August 3rd for show-stopping performances in Logan. Professional performers from Broadway and all over bring you Andrew Lloyd Webber's Cats, the lively classic Guys and Dolls, the hilarious Anything Goes with spectacular tap dancing and music by Cole Porter, cult classic Little Shop of Horrors, and Puccini's opera Gianni Schicchi with its sequel Buoso's Ghost. Stop the commercial! I'm interrupting myself to tell you that Utah students K through 12 can get a free ticket to all Utah Festival performances this summer. Claim yours online now. Where was I? Oh, yeah. Cult classic Little Shop of Horrors and Puccini's opera Gianni Schicchi with its sequel Buoso's Ghost. Plus, late-night cabarets, 5 concerts, breakfast with the stars, academy classes, and more. Tickets at utahfestival.org. utahfestival.org.
Any Hour Services can make sure your AC keeps you cool this summer. Whether you need a tune-up, repair, or just a second opinion about replacing it, call Any Hour Services or visit anyhourservices.com.
My wife and I always loved doing everything together. Jiu-jitsu, kayaking, and intimacy was always on point. It was around my early 30s when I noticed a downward trend. Watching a lot of TV, putting on weight, and just full of self-doubt. I had tried another men's clinic with disappointing results. It's the personalized treatment I receive at Revive Men's Health that has been the complete game changer for me. I've got my energy and motivation back, I'm feeling stronger than I did in my 20s, and it made me a much better husband to my wife.
I'm Eric Ramos, healthcare provider at Revive Men's Health. If you are always feeling tired or moody, have a difficult time sleeping, or decreased libido, you may be suffering from low testosterone.
Book your free T-check and exam at Revive Men's Health Salt Lake City. Call 801-263-7777. That's 801-263-7777. Or visit ReviveMen'sHealth.com.
Boyd Matheson. Listening to Inside Sources is a little different from just reading the headlines because we're always going to get you into that think again moment. We have experts from around the country, across the world, and right here local to home that'll help us dive in and get past just the hype, the fluff, the fake fights, and the false choice so we can get into the news to help you connect the dots and make the news make sense.
Join Inside Sources with Boyd Matheson, 1 to 3 on KSL News Radio.
If you're struggling with your mortgage, there's a free government program that offers expert one-on-one advice about your mortgage options. Call 1-888-995-HOPE or visit makinghomeaffordable.gov. Brought to you by the U.S. Treasury, HUD, and the Ad Council.
With the 3 things you need to know this hour, I'm Dan Bonas. First, search teams trying to find a man and a woman missing in Grand County. Second, just a few more hours for people to put their ballots in drop boxes or vote in person in today's primary election. And third, there were at least 1,000 avalanches in Utah this past winter. Those are just the ones we know about. 95 degrees, partly cloudy in Salt Lake City. Back to Inside Sources on KSL News Radio.
Boyd Matheson divides rage from reason on Inside Sources.
I want to go back to a commencement speech from a few years ago from former Utah Governor Mike Leavitt. And it's one of my favorite speeches. Of all the speeches I go back to on a regular basis, this is one of them. This was actually delivered back in 2018. And the title was about the economics of goodness. And so I want to give you just a little tee up in terms of where former Governor Leavitt went. It was back in the summer of 1999. He was in a meeting on the 107th floor of the World Trade Center, interesting, before 9/11. And they had a whole group of people that had gathered together for this big kind of a think tank meeting, and they were projecting forward to 2015. And they wanted to talk about and try to envision, if they could, what would be the big happenings? What would be the big issues? Who would win the Nobel Prize in economics in 2015? And they went around the room, and again, this was a very high-powered, a lot of intellectual firepower underneath the hood in this group. And they had all kinds of economists and futurists and business leaders and government leaders and so on. And as they went around the room, they talked about the big happenings, the big changes that would come. And a banker, of course, spoke about paperless currency, and an oil executive talked about tension in the Middle East, and on it went. And then it got to former Governor Leavitt, and he framed his answer in a very, very different way that sort of shook the room. He called it the economics of goodness. Take a listen.
Every nation or state has economic assets that produce wealth. It may be minerals, it may be a seaport, it may be climate, but there is a universal asset of immense value inherent in any community if we use it. And that power is simply the inclination of its citizens to do the right thing voluntarily.
Doing the right thing voluntarily. Again, that takes principle. That takes a focus on not politics, but on the things that bring us together. Former Governor Leavitt went on to lay out the vast amount of economic power that would be gained from a society that practiced the economics of goodness. What would change? What would it be able to solve? What would it be able to do?
Imagine the economic heft of a nation, a state, or a community that was free of drugs and alcohol abuse. Healthcare costs would plummet. Worker productivity would skyrocket. Families that are torn apart by abuse and financial hardship, wrought by substance abuse, would remain together. Welfare rolls would fall. There would be less violence in society. We would build and maintain fewer prisons. Imagine the economic power of a nation able to invest trillions of dollars over time back into education and investment and research because of their deployment of this great power. Such a place would prosper.
Such a place would prosper. We're going to come back to some of the areas where we are spending, and often spending out of control, deficit spending in this country, coming up later in the program. Coming up at 2:35, we'll break some of that spending and what's happening there. But I thought it was interesting that former Governor Leavitt talked about, again, this was back in 2018, saying, imagine a community, imagine a country, imagine a state that didn't have to spend all that money on building prisons or the judicial system, and didn't have to have all the health care costs that come from addiction and abuse and all of those different things that happen in our society. If we were focused on the goodness and the things that we can do for our neighbor, and the things that we can do together in community, the economic power of such a place would be extraordinary. So as former Governor Leavitt was going through this conversation, again, with a lot of pretty high-powered thinkers, sitting in the World Trade Center in 1999, he got interrupted by someone who thought perhaps Mike Leavitt had gone just a little too far, and maybe was turning this into a religious discussion rather than an economic discussion. But listen to the response.
For a moment, there was silence in that room, and then a surprise. One of the participants practically shouted at me, "What do you mean by goodness? You're trying to turn this into some kind of a religious discussion." Before I could respond, a well-known economist beat me to it. "Not true," he said. "I'm an atheist, and this isn't about religion. It's about human behavior and the predictability of consequences. People who work hard do better than slackers. Those who are honest get in less trouble than those who cheat. People who are kind have more friends than those who are cruel. Communities where people serve and care for each other are safer than those where that's not true."
The absolute predictability of consequences and the power of goodness. Those are pretty simple things. Those are pretty simple principles. And yet so often in our politics, we get so lost in the power struggle, the zero-sum game, that political parties and people who are looking for political power convince us that we have to engage in. It's why many good people, people of faith and people of no faith for that matter, have disengaged from the political process because they're exhausted and exasperated by it. It doesn't make any sense to them. But when you look at what it is that we're trying to do, if you look at that economic heft that power of goodness, of good people doing good things, starting in their own neighborhoods and community, that totally changes the economics for everybody. It changes the focus of every institution of government and for all the important things that connect us together as a society. That connective tissue becomes powerful, becomes meaningful. It becomes transformational, especially for those who are struggling, because we can turn our full time and attention to them because we can, because we've dealt with some of the other issues. And so as former Governor Leavitt was kind of going down that list of, no, this is not about a religious discussion. This is simply about the absolute predictability of consequences, where families are together and kids are in good schools, crime rates are going to go down in that area. Where people are not dealing with addiction, you have a whole host of other options and opportunities that come because of that. People who are honest get in a heck of a lot less trouble than people who aren't. People who work hard and are committed to excellence do a lot better than those who are slackers and who are just drifting along. And so it's that absolute predictability of consequences and the economics of goodness. Those are the conversations we should be having both in our politics and in our faith organizations, because that's where you actually live it. So how do we live it? On a day like today, it's election day. And so, yes, there are politics to be had, and there is a political process to be followed. But as we think that through and as we cast our votes, are we casting our votes based on the economics of power? Or are we basing our votes and casting our votes on the economics of goodness? Now, we live in a pretty extraordinary place with a lot of people leaning in and looking in at what we're doing here in the state of Utah and how we're going about it. And yes, we have flaws and challenges and problems like everywhere else, but we also have this unique ability to tap into not the power of our politics, but the power of goodness and good people. And I'm telling you, the power of goodness is the greatest economic engine that is actually the founding engine, the driving engine, the critical force that has propelled the United States of America to where it is, that has lifted more people out of poverty, has fueled more freedom, has driven more dreams than any civilization in the history of the world. So as you do cast your vote today and stay with KSL throughout the day today, we've got you covered all the way until late in the evening tonight with all of the results of the politics and the process of it all. But as you cast your vote, don't just cast your vote for someone because you think they will get political power. Cast your vote because you think they know how to harness the economic power of goodness. That wraps it up for hour number one of Inside Sources here on KSL News Radio. We'll step aside for some top of the hour news, but don't go anywhere. We got a big hour number two coming up next. Stick around.
KSL FM Midvale.
KSL Salt Lake City.
From the KSL Common Spirit Health Studios, this is KSL News Radio.
Utah's news, traffic, and weather station.
It's 2 o'clock at KSL News Radio. I'm Dan Bonas. KSL's top story this hour. People have been out casting their votes since early this morning. KSL News Radio's Adam Small caught up with a few to see what motivated them to go to the polls.
On her way out of the polls, voter and Republican delegate Sarah Lay told me some of the issues at the top of her mind.
Immigration's a big one. How Utah is spending money is another big one. People that are staying in office for too long, I don't like that. And also just people that do what they say they're going to do.
The other voters I spoke to also mentioned a couple of those issues. I also heard things like taxes and the environment, but all were very united on this front.
It's important to get out here and vote.
I think it's a great opportunity. I think we're very lucky to live in a country where we have a right to vote.
Like, it is your civic duty. You live in the best country in the world.
Adam Small, KSL News Radio.
Our top national story this hour from ABC News. Police from Kenya have arrived in Haiti, part of a UN-backed security force to address the gang violence in that country. President Biden says he's glad to see it. He met with Kenya's president last month to talk about this mission. 1,000 Kenyans have gone to Haiti while the United States supplies logistics help, intelligence, and equipment. Your money at this moment, the Dow Jones average has been down all day. Right now, down 298 points, while the NASDAQ is up right now 220 points. And our KSL weather, hot today and possibly thunder showers tomorrow. That's next. KSL News Time 2:01.
Here's a way to get breaking news updates anywhere you go.
At the store or in a work meeting, you can get breaking news on your phone.
You can quickly read it, swipe, or click for more. It's super discreet, super fast.
That's the app for KSL News Radio.
When you crash your car, you get it fixed. When your computer crashes, you get a new one. But what will you do if you've been saving in a 401k or an IRA and the market crashes? If you're in your 30s or 40s, you'll be just fine. But if you're in or near retirement, you could be in trouble. Mike Stevens and his team at Capital Wealth Advisors are here to help. They can run a risk analysis to see if you're too heavily invested in the market. Don't let the ups and downs of Wall Street control you or your retirement dreams. Call 801-210-5500 today to schedule your risk analysis with Mike Stevens and the team at Capital Wealth Advisors. That's 801-210-5500. Crashes happen. Question is, are you ready? Capital Wealth Advisors, 801-210-5500. Investing involves risk, including the potential loss of principal. Advisory services offered through Capital Wealth Advisors, LLC, a state of Utah registered investment advisor.
I support Rochelle Morris for Salt Lake County Council because she's a collaborative leader.
I support Rochelle Morris for Salt Lake County because she's conservative.
I support Rochelle Morris for County Council because she has the experience and skills to get the job done.
Rochelle Morris will work hard for all of us who call Salt Lake County home.
Hi, I'm Rochelle Morris, and I approve this message because I'm ready to make Salt Lake County work better for all of us. We need leaders on the County Council who will make sure our parks are safe for our families to enjoy. We need innovative leaders who will stop property tax increases and be wise stewards of taxpayer money. I would love to earn your vote in the Republican primary on June 25th. Learn more at voterochellemorris.com. Again, that's voterochellemorris.com.
Paid for by Rochelle Morris for Salt Lake County Council.
Traffic and weather together brought to you by Sinclair's Dino Pay app. Save up to 20 cents per gallon. Here's Ricky Meese.
We've had a vehicle fire in Parley's Canyon, eastbound I-80, a couple of miles east of Lambs Canyon, and it did cause a little bit of backup, even though it's on the right shoulder. And a surface street crash in Taylorsville, Redwood Road, about 5600 south. Fill up your bucket list in Box Elder County. History, recreation, and wildlife, and excellent dining and shopping await you. Learn more at visitboxeldercounty.com, sponsored by the Utah Office of Tourism. Ricky Meese in the KSL Traffic Center.
Sunny and hot today, high near 100. Then tomorrow, a little bit cooler with a chance of thunderstorms. About the same tomorrow, the next day. Right now, 97 degrees and partly cloudy. I'm Dan Bomas from the KSL Common Spirit Health Studios. Listen online at kslnewsradio.com. We're Utah's news, traffic, and weather station.
Inside Sources. Inside Sources. America's voice of reason. Boyd Matheson on Utah's home for elevated conversation. Inside Sources on KSL News Radio.
Well, as we approach the July 4th holiday next week, it's a great time to get a proper perspective on patriotism and the powerful principles that actually propel it. The principles that founded this nation are just as applicable today as they were to the patriots, the statesmen, the early citizens of our country. Among the mighty principles that shaped America, freedom and liberty, of course, tend to dominate the headlines. But what if underneath those headlines, what if civic charity was the indispensable principle that really shaped and is critical to preserving us as a nation? Let's begin.
Think you know the news of the day? Think again with Boyd Matheson on KSL News Radio.
We're very thrilled to have joining us on the program today Elder Matthew S. Holland, General Authority 70 of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. He is currently serving as the Executive Director of the Church Communication Department. Of course, Elder Holland's long academic honors include stints at various prestigious universities, not only in the U.S., but at Oxford. His decade at the helm of Utah Valley University as its president proved absolutely transformational to that institution. And his award-winning book, The Bonds of Affection, Civic Charity in the Making of America, I have as required reading for every aspiring leader and I think every concerned citizen. And we're really thrilled to have him joining us on the program. Elder Holland, welcome.
Thank you, Boyd. Honor and pleasure to be with you.
Well, as we approach this 4th of July week coming up next week, you're part of an important celebration in the city of Provo. Of course, America's Freedom Festival at Provo has a patriotic service every year. This year it falls on June 30th, 7 p.m. at the Marriott Center. You'll be the keynote speaker there. As you look forward to that address, I know you're one who has studied deeply and taken big drinks from the well, I think, of patriotic leaders and thoughtful folks over the ages. What is your sense going into this holiday, and why should it still matter more than just a nice barbecue and a day off?
Well, I am excited to be part of this event. You know, I grew up in Utah County and attended the events, and it's always a wonderful season to gather across the community from different perspectives, different viewpoints, but united in a common view that there is something special about this country, about our inheritance, about the freedoms that we enjoy, and the importance of perpetuating those freedoms. This is something that the founders themselves talked about from the very get-go, which is not only how do we establish freedom, but how do we perpetuate it forward? And that's what I think this celebration is about. It's not just about the past. It's about appreciating the past so that we can enjoy the proper present, if you will, and pass it on to our future generations. And so I think these are both enjoyable but also really important moments.
I love the fact that you talked about the fact that it's not just looking back and it's not even just about the present. You've studied Lincoln deeply and richly. I always am so inspired in going through the Gettysburg Address that we always talk about those that died there, and he was giving honor to those that gave the last full measure of devotion. But the majority of that speech wasn't about them. He knew they passed their test. It was focused on us. It was that we here be highly resolved, that we be so dedicated. Give us a sense of why those principles are the key to perpetuating our freedom moving forward.
Well, they're key because, they've worked. I mean, and that was not a guarantee when they were first instituted. This was a very audacious thing that the founders were doing, to think that a free people could govern themselves according to democratic Republican principles. The fact is that it's not just worked, but it's worked marvelously well. I mean, the country's not without its flaws, and it's not without mistakes it's made, and there are still things that need to be changed and improved, but the fact is it's unleashed a proliferation of individual and religious liberties, human creativity, economic prosperity, and done that in a condition of order and organization. And it's done that through the voice of the people. And so I think we want to look long and hard at saying, well, let's not take care of that. Let's not pass that along. I think we need to realize we've inherited something very special. And so the point is, let's help pass it along, just like the founders did for us. They did what they did at great sacrifice and through great forethought and intelligence and dialogue, and we owe it to the future generations to do for them what the founders did for us.
I love that. And as you look back at some of those who did some of that hard work and heavy lifting of laying that foundation, I know one of your heroes and often one of the forgotten founders, I think, in many ways, John Winthrop. Why is it that John Winthrop and his work has been such an important influence on you?
Well, it is important, and you're right. He is the forgotten founder. I think that's the subtitle of the best biography written about him, John Winthrop, America's Forgotten Founding Father. I didn't really know him, to be honest with you, before I encountered him in graduate school, and I was wrestling with these ideas about, in addition, as you teed things up so nicely today, in addition to principles of liberty and justice and equality that we've been talking about for hundreds of years, about what's behind the genius of the American experiment. I was looking at this idea of charity, Christian charity. It's certainly the preeminent Christian virtue, and Paul says, "Let all your things be done with charity." And so I was asking myself, well, wouldn't all things include our politics, and what would that mean? And And then lo and behold, I discover this address called A Model of Christian Charity by John Winthrop. And then lo and behold, to find not only was the subject matter important, but he was this profoundly influential figure, really of the whole New England Puritan period, probably the most dominant, thoughtful, philosophical, influential leader we had during that period. And again, that period had its challenges, and there are things we needed to change and get away from that period. But he planted in the soil of America's political consciousness this idea that if this is really going to work, if we're going to live together and build something unique out of this wilderness and become a city upon a hill, that was a phrase that John Kennedy used and Ronald Reagan has used, and it it originally comes from the Bible, but it was first talked about by John Winthrop in 1630 in this speech, A Model of Christian Charity, and his call was to say, if we're going to become this city upon a hill, we have to do it while practicing this preeminent virtue of gospel discipleship called Christian charity. And so in that way, I think he really is a fascinating and important and underappreciated founder that we ought to know better and study more than we do.
Yeah, and I think we always say the words have meaning and the meaning matter, and I don't think anyone more than Winthrop understood that, and I don't know if any of the founders deployed it. We always talk about Jefferson and Madison as, great with the quill and the pen, but when it came to those words and conveying those principles, Winthrop really was kind of in a league of his own.
Well, he certainly was the first, and he did it most explicitly, and then wrestled with it practically. That's one of the reasons I'm taken to people like Winthrop and Jefferson and Lincoln, is these are men that not only had kind of high theoretical, philosophical, theological ideas, they were then forced to translate that into action, which further refined those ideas, but also made them real and meaningful and lasting. And Winthrop is really the first in the whole American political tradition to do that, to meet that kind of nexus of thought and action and try to do something lasting with it.
Yeah, it was much more than just poetry. It was the prose of governing and living it and wrestling with it in the practicalities of what they were dealing with day to day. Well, we're going to do what we often do on this program. We always say that, as Einstein was purported to have said, wasn't that he was any smarter, he was just willing to stay with the question a little bit longer. We're going to stay with the question just a little bit longer and dig a little deeper. And again, if you're just joining us, we have Elder Matthew S. Holland from the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints on the line with us. He will be the keynote speaker at America's Freedom Festival Patriotic Service, Sunday, June 30th at 7 p.m. at the Marriott Center. It is free and open to the public, and it is an event that will set your July 4th framing in a better space. Will make a difference for you, for your family, and hopefully for the generations to come. We'll continue the conversation.
Think again on Inside Sources with Boyd Matheson. In a state where the heat can be really hot,
at or near 100 degrees,
how will you stay cool?
Probably in the pool again.
I drive with all my windows down.
Drink lots of water.
June Heatwave, the sequel, playing this week at an outside near you. Rated G for genuinely hot.
Who is the most interesting candidate for Senate? John Curtis, of course. Serving as mayor, he didn't just improve public services, he transformed Provo into one of the best-run cities in the country, all while cutting the budget, leaving with an unheard of 94% approval rating. In Congress, Curtis was named one of the most effective lawmakers. Curtis voted repeatedly to stop Washington's reckless spending and secure the border. Protecting farmers and ranchers from government overreach, he transferred more federal land to Utah than anyone else in state history. He authored legislation in Congress to hold China accountable. Now John Curtis is running for Senate. Unlike typical politicians, Curtis gets things done. Vote conservative John Curtis for U.S. Senate in the Republican primary on or before June 25th. EDF Action Votes is responsible for the content of this advertising, paid for by EDF Action Votes, edfactionvotes.org, and not authorized by any candidate or candidates committee.
Summer is here, Tim.
It is definitely here.
And if you've been thinking about losing weight, no time like the present. It's going to happen faster than you think. Just listen to Trisha.
So I started in May of last year, and I was at 173 pounds. And by December, I had lost 43 pounds. Everyone at SOTA has been amazing. I learned so much about nutrition and so much about how my body processes certain types of foods. And it's been absolutely amazing. So I would recommend it to anyone.
We add our voices to that.
Yeah, the average female is going to lose 2 to 3 pounds a week. The average male, 3 to 5. So by the end of summer, you could already have that goal weight reached, and then you can stay on the maintenance program for as long as it takes.
I've been on the maintenance program for over 2 years. I lost 34 pounds.
And my daughter lost 42 pounds. By the way, the maintenance phase, no extra charge. Find out how they can help you. Go to sotaweightloss.com, spelled SOTA, and it stands for State of the
Art.
Do you know why more homeowners choose Any Hour Services for help when it's time to replace their air conditioners? What's up, everybody? I'm Mike Wilson with Any Hour Services, and the main reasons people choose Any Hour Services is because of our people, processes, and convenience. People tell us all the time that there's just something different about having an Any Hour Services technician in their home. That's why our over 23,000 Google reviews mention our technicians by name. Another reason is our 7-step install process that we call the Any Hour Difference. It all starts with a needs analysis where you explain what you like and dislike about your current system. This helps us design and size a system that fits your comfort and efficiency preferences as well as your home's airflow requirements. As for convenience, most of our installs are completed in 1 day. We also have flexible, no money down financing options available, even if you've been told no in the past. So if you've been thinking about getting a new air conditioner, call Any Hour Services and schedule a free estimate today. Google Any Hour Services or schedule online at anyhourservices.com. No one helps more homeowners than Any Hour Services.
3 days only. Friday, Saturday, Sunday. Save thousands on hot tubs and swim spas. It's a major manufacturer's liquidation of hundreds of in-stock spas. Utah State Fair Park. Hot tubs discounted 40 to 80% to the lowest possible price, starting at $29.99. Free professional delivery. Take possession tomorrow, next week, next month, or next season. The Hot Tub and Swim Spa Sale. Utah State Fair Park. Shop over a dozen models of swim spas from 11 feet to over 19 feet. Swim spas offer low-impact exercise, active family fun, unsurpassed relaxation, and installation in 1 day. The Hot Tub and Swim Spa Sale. Everything must go. Free parking, free admission. You can't afford to miss this. It's a major manufacturer's liquidation of hundreds of in-stock spas. Friday, noon to 8 p.m. Saturday, 10 a.m. to 8 p.m. Sunday, 10 a.m. to 6 p.m. The Hot Tub and Swim Spa Sale. Utah State Fair Park. Visit hottubandSwimSpaSale.com.
Dave and Debbie.
It's impossible to digest and consume all of the news that's now coming at us through either social media or through web pages or through the radio. Pick what is most impactful in your life and focus on that. And that's what Dave and I do every single morning. We pick those issues that are most important to our listeners and we boil it down so it's digestible. It's simple to understand.
I think we're trying to find the essence of the story. You know, you can't be an expert on all things, but that doesn't mean you can't be curious and really find out more and educate yourself and learn the complexities of an issue. But I think all of us start at ground zero on everything. Ask questions, show that curiosity.
And then if you need more research, you can always go to KSLNewsRadio.com and learn more.
Listen for Dave and Dejanovic 9 to noon on KSL News Radio.
With the 3 things you need to know this hour, I'm Dan Bomas. First, voters are casting ballots in today's primary election, listing a variety of issues that are important to them. Second, 1,000 police officers from Kenya have arrived in Haiti to try and control the gang violence in that country. And third, a firefighter who was injured by a falling tree in southern Utah has improved now to stable condition. 97 degrees, partly cloudy in Salt Lake City. Back to Inside Sources on KSL News Radio.
Boyd Matheson divides rage from reason on Inside Sources.
Welcome back to Inside Sources here on KSL News Radio. It's great to be with you today, as always, as we move our way towards the July 4th holiday. Again, about much more than fireworks and some good barbecue and a day off. There are some important principles that we have to get to, things that expand and go well beyond anything we look at politically or in our government. it's much more than that. It is about we the people, and it's about a set of principles that has driven freedom and will continue to light the way for us moving forward. Elder Matthew S. Holland, General Authority 70 of the Church of Jesus Christ, is going to be the keynote speaker at America's Freedom Festival in Provo at the Patriotic Service on Sunday, June the 30th at 7 p.m. at the Marriott Center. It is free and open to the public. It is a game changer, and it is one you don't want to miss this year especially. Elder Holland, as we pick up the conversation and really looking at this whole idea of civic charity and the making of America, you've written so eloquently on that over the years. I want to get into a couple of other spaces that I think are important. Obviously, there's a lot of political polarization. I don't think we're as divided as a nation, separated maybe, usually self-separated. But there are some good examples from the election of Thomas Jefferson that I think point us away from the politics and back to the principles.
Well, that's certainly what Thomas Jefferson did himself when after his election. It was a brutal, bruising election. It ruptured what had been his long, dear friendship with John Adams. They were the two standard carriers for their respective parties, and there was a lot of collateral damage in that election. At some level, for me, that's a reminder that we've gone through moments like this before as a country, and we've weathered them, and we've weathered them in part by again looking to some fundamental principles, and that's what Jefferson did, and took time in his first inaugural to really, rather than highlight the cleavage and the differences, he took time to say there's still more that unites us than divides us as a country, and we need to conduct our affairs that way with what he called affection. And the source of that affection, those bonds of affection, came from principles that he found taught by Jesus Christ in the New Testament, and that those became, I think, at that stage in his life, a lot more important to him than they did at the front. He was in a little different place originally, and I think in the actual hustle and bustle and give and take and difficulties of politics, he came to see, in addition to principles of liberty, there needs to be some principles of love and charity and benevolence between us as fellow citizens to help hold this together.
So important. And I love the fact that when he went to be inaugurated, both Washington and Adams, of course, had worn the ceremonial military honors and a sword, a ceremonial sword, and Jefferson left those home. The news report said he went in plain clothes as a normal citizen, which I thought was a great message to maybe we all could leave the proverbial sword maybe off the internet and off social media might be helpful as well. As you look at Lincoln's impact and influence, again, someone you've studied deeply there, give us a principle, maybe an under the headline principle that you saw in his life and his leadership that we might be thinking about as we roll into the July 4th week.
Well, I suppose if I were to sum that up in a line, it would be that introductory line of the last paragraph of his second inaugural, where the nation had been through so much and he had been through so much. And I think this was on the cusp of victory for the Union and probably a chance to gloat and take a victory lap and maybe poke an eye or two, if you will. And what he did is he stood up and said, with malice toward none, with charity for all. And that in and of itself is kind of a breathtaking statement in that setting, that we're going to do this without hating each other. We're going to try to be filled with love. But then what's really key here is what comes next. With firmness in the right as God gives us to see the right. I sometimes think when we say, well, we just have to love each other more, that means we just all have to agree, that we never can have we have to find some non-judgmental way of just coming together on every issue. And Lincoln said, no, there's still right and wrong. There's truth. We're gonna do our best to vigorously defend and honor that, but we just have to do that without getting cankered by hatred and malice, and we have to do it with love, and that may help us find ways to accommodate here and there, and to adjust here and there, and to meet where we can in the middle. But other times we'll have to hold to principles, because we're not going to surrender truth. We're not going to surrender principles just in the name of sheer charity. And that's the genius of Lincoln, was that combination of velvet and steel. Is that he He had that strong resolve that there was a right answer about the questions before the nation in that Civil War period, but he was determined to do that with as much love and courtesy and respect and bringing people together as he possibly could.
Fantastic. And then finally, I want to circle back to where you began this conversation and this idea of religious liberty, a pluralistic society, and really this idea that part of the genius and part of what would hold this new nation together was this ability for people to bring their whole authentic self into the public square, not just in the mosque or the synagogue or the chapel or the church, but we could really have that respect, pluralistic society, and that freedom for everyone.
Yeah, that is one of the great, I think, ingenious contributions of America to this whole question, is that we knew we needed to create something where religion would not be imposed upon people, where we would not use the blunt instrument of the state to make people think and act a certain way. And so we resist that. And yet at the same time, we create a condition of freedom and expression and respect for religion that allows it to be part of who we are in all of our places and circumstances of interaction, including the public square. And those two things have to be held together in a kind of a healthy tension, if you will. And it's not always clear cut and it's not always easy, but we're committed to both sides of the equation. And that's what I think is one of the most important aspects of this whole country. And we're still wrestling with it. We still stay at it, and we still have to continue to be committed to it moving forward. But I think as we do that, we create a big wide space for lots of people to come together and lots of people of different beliefs to let those beliefs flourish. And in the end, it means that religion is healthier and more authentic, but it doesn't become tyrannical. And I think that's what we hope for as Americans.
Fantastic. Elder Matthew S. Holland, General Authority 70, The Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. He will be the keynote speaker at a patriotic service coming up this Sunday, June 30th, 7 p.m. at the Marriott Center, part of America's Freedom Festival at Provo. Be there. It is open to the public. No tickets are required, and it will be a night that will set your July 4th week in proper motion and foster and spark some crucial conversations, hopefully not just in our communities, but around our kitchen tables as well. Elder Holland, thanks so much for making time for us today.
Thanks, Boyd. Always great to be with you.
Again, a big thanks to Elder Matthew S. Holland for joining us today, and watch for that coming up on Sunday, June 30th, Freedom Festival, Marriott Center, 7 p.m. We'll step aside for some bottom-of-the-hour news. More Inside Sources coming up next here on KSL News Radio. Stick around. We'll be right back.
It's 2:30 at KSL News Radio. I'm Dan Bomas. KSL's top local story this hour. The Utah County Clerk speaking out about why early voting numbers in his county were lagging behind the rest of the state.
Yeah, I'm not sure why they waited so much, but yeah, we had a really big turn-in yesterday, and it jumped from like 16% to 22.6%.
The clerk says they received more than 14,000 ballots just last night. Our top national story this hour from ABC News. A temporary election worker under arrest in Phoenix for allegedly stealing a security key fob used to gain access to the tabulation machines. Maricopa County Sheriff Russ Skinner.
From my understanding, the stolen digital magnetic key is something that has the potential to actually log into the tabulation machines in the tech.
Authorities say 27-year-old Walter Ringfield had previously been charged in a theft last year, but he was in a diversion program, so no conviction showed during a background check. Your money at this moment, the Dow Jones average closing trading today down 299 points, while the NASDAQ was up 220. The S&P 500 was up 21. And our KSL weather looks like we might just hit that 100 mark today. That's next. KSL News Time, 2:30.
News doesn't just mean information or dates.
It's the story of our local history being told in real time.
Be a part of the story. This is Tim Hughes and Amanda Dixon.
We hope to be a part of your story. We have you covered on KSL News Radio.
We need Colby Jenkins. His commitment to the Constitution, fiscal responsibility, limited government, and individual liberty make him the best candidate to represent Utah's values in Washington.
The problem in Washington isn't just Democrats. Half of the Republicans in Congress vote for deficit spending, endless wars, and unconstitutional mandates. That's why we need better Republicans, like Colby Jenkins.
Paid for by the Constitutional Conservatives Fund PAC. Not authorized by any candidate or candidates committee.
Josh loves summers in Utah, but he hates to paint year after year, so he called Rhino Shield.
We have a cedar-sided home at the edge of the woods, painted like 1980s beige, and we wanted something that was more of a mid-century and modern look. We were driving around and we saw a sign in somebody's yard and said Rhino Shield. It's not paint.
Rhino Shield ceramic technology is formulated for our unique climate here in Utah and is Class 1 fire rated.
Gave Rhino Shield a call, and in fact, they were fantastic with the arrangement on scheduling. The 25-year guarantee was important to us. This is our forever home, and we want to make sure that whatever we're doing is going to last a long time.
Utah, you can have the 25-year guaranteed protection of Rhino Shield for 10% off the regular price.
I'd say if you're thinking about Rhino Shield, just do it. It's been 2 years now, and it still looks like the day it went on.
This offer is limited, so call 435-246-4466, 435-246-4466, or rhinoshieldwest.com.
Go Rhino Shield.
Discover the best of senior living at Trio Orem and Trio South Ogden. Today's older adults aren't wrapping up their life's journey, they're seeking a new one. And Trio Independent Living is here to help them do just that. With a smart, modern, and connected lifestyle, residents cultivate relationships and maximize independence through signature programs like Prime Fit Wellness that bring living well and well-being to life. Welcome to the new age of senior living. Schedule your visit at leisurecare.com/Utah today.
Jeff Kaplan.
I'm energized by breaking news. First of all, because it's right now, and second of all, because in many cases the audience needs to know. There's no more important service that we can provide, and I find it critically important to get more details to the audience as quickly as possible. There's nothing more energizing than that for me. Not at all. The most important thing we do is breaking news. I am gratified that so many people listen to me every afternoon on KSL, but what they don't know is that there are so many people behind the scenes making it happen, checking on the traffic, answering the phones, making the calls, talking to the newsmakers. They're out in the street, into the field to get the raw information, and then putting it all together so that I can sit in front of a microphone and be a source of information every afternoon. But there are so many people who make it happen. That's what you don't know.
Ride Home with Jeff Kaplan, weekdays 3 to 7 on KSL News Radio.
Emergency traffic now brought to you by Sinclair's Dino Pay app. Save up to 20 cents per gallon. Here's Ricky Meese.
We've had a vehicle fire eastbound I-80 approaching Parley Summit. Now, fire crews are just now pulling away. They've had that right lane blocked to traffic, and that is what's causing about 2 to 2.5 miles of solid backups. With these delays, eastbound I-80 going from Lambs Canyon up to Parley Summit, you want to add an extra 10 minutes minimum to your travel time. Ricky Meese in the KSL Traffic Center.
Sunny and hot today. We could still reach the high predicted of 100 degrees. Then tomorrow, a little bit cooler, and Thursday also with a chance of thunderstorms. And right now, we're at 97 degrees. It's partly cloudy. I'm Dan Bomas from the KSL Common Spirit Health Studios. Listen online at kslnewsradio.com. We're Utah's news, traffic, and weather station.
Inside Sources. Inside Sources. America's voice of reason. Boyd Matheson on Utah's home for elevated conversation. Inside Sources on KSL News Radio.
Welcome back to Inside Sources here on KSL News Radio. It's great to be with you today. As always, I am Boyd Matheson. Social media has definitely revolutionized the way we communicate with one another. Some for the better, some suboptimal, we'll call it that. It's obviously helped us build and maintain some connections a little bit more conveniently. It's also made sharing information a lot easier. However, it's not all sunshine and lollipops. There are some negative impacts that have come along the way. And one of the things that we may not have been thinking about in the myriad of things that social media has broken is, I don't know, we've been talking about the fact that social media broke slang. That is according to Dan Brooks, a writer and columnist, great thinker based in Missoula, Montana. He has a fantastic piece you need to check out in The Atlantic called Social Media Broke Slang. Now We All Speak Phone, and he joins us on the line. Dan, welcome to the show.
Hi, Boyd. Thanks for having me.
Fantastic piece, and we often talk about things that are broken, but I don't think any of us got up this morning thinking, you know what's really broken is slang, and it's social media's fault. Tell us about it.
Thanks, Boyd. I'm glad you liked the piece. So this came from an idea that I had been complaining about with my friends, which is a lot of people who are in their 30s and 40s and work in media, as I do, talk the same way as 15-year-olds, people my son's age. He's 16. And it got me thinking about where I learn new slang. And what I realized is that I learn almost all of it from Twitter, which is my social media platform of choice, now called X. And I believe that social media in general has had a standardizing effect on slang so that people from all different backgrounds are tending toward talking the same way.
And so as you look at how that breaks things down, it's such an interesting thing because we often just think about slang and the kids, but there is an impact there in terms of connection as well. Describe that for us.
Yeah, I think there is. So one function slang serves is to convey information about our backgrounds, what groups we belong to, what subcultures we identify with. And the term for this content in speech is X-formation. X-formation differs from information in that when I say something to you, when I tell you, for example, I'm a freelance writer and I live in Missoula, I'm giving you information in what I say, but the way I say it is also communicating X-formation about me, who I am, where I come from, what my background is. So, for example, if I use a double negative, if I say there ain't no reason for us to all be speaking like teenagers, that immediately is going to convey some X-formation about my educational background or like what other groups I identify with, what kind of discourse I'm used to doing. And that X-formation is very useful. It's one of the main reasons slang exists. If we all spoke standard English, we would be much more limited in what we can communicate by speaking. And my theory is we are all kind of speaking a new standardized language that is coming from our shared use of the phone and these social media spaces.
Wow, I think that is so fascinating. So I want to dig a little deeper and get under the hood a little bit and talk about something you point out in the piece about the absence of that distinctive subculture expression or just even distinctive expression because social media has made everything so unified. Again, the phones have kind of pushed us all into the same thing. What is the impact of that? I think that's fascinating.
I think the main impact is a sort of paradoxical reduction in what language can do. An example of like a very niche subcultural slang that I encountered in the early to mid 90s through the film Blood In, Blood Out, which is a feature film about three Mexican-American brothers growing up around Los Angeles. The film is packed with like a very specific Southern California Spanish-influenced slang. And when I was in high school and my friends and I saw this movie, we became obsessed with the sort of slang in that movie and the world that it kind of hinted at, which was a world that was very different from our own and therefore really fascinating. And we just loved the way all the characters in this movie talked. And we were just smart enough not to try to talk like them in our own lives, thank God. But I think like when to this day, if I hear a guy say like Simón, which is a Spanish exclamation that roughly translates to for sure, I find that like very evocative and it sends me a little bit of information about that person that I wouldn't get if they said for sure. And I think the paradox of us all learning all of this new slang like tea or vibes or it's giving blank from using the phone is that while the number of words in the language is expanding, the ability of the language to convey these shades of nuances is paradoxically contracting.
Yeah, and I think that actually creates a greater disconnect from people. I love the way you round out the piece, and I'd love to have you kind of unpack this for us a little bit. You say that the crisis in American slang is that we grasp what everyone is saying so well, again, because of the phone, that we think we know one another, when in fact we understand less and less. Describe that for us.
Yeah, this to me is the crux of the problem, because when I'm interacting with other people online, when I'm arguing on Twitter, which I absolutely shouldn't do, and I should know better, but I do spend a lot of time doing, I know very little about them. I only know what they type into the box and post, like what they say to me, what they say to their followers, etc. What I don't get are like the sound of their voice or their physical appearance or all these little clues that give me a sense of, for lack of a better term, what kind of person I'm dealing with. And so as a result, if they talk like me, I assume that they are like me. And I have very little sympathy for people who are like me, because if they have my background and my resources and my education, then they should also have the same opinions I do. So when I encounter someone I disagree with, I'm like, why does this like middle class, medium educated, middle-aged white person have the wrong idea when it's all so clear to me? Whereas if I'm disagreeing with like, a woman from Pakistan who is much older than me, I am much more likely to assume that if she says something I disagree with, it's a result of her different experiences and perspectives.
And that always leads to better questions that helps foster the curiosity that I think we're so lacking because of social media. We're so in our own bubbles that we assume everything is the same. And that loss of curiosity and that next level question of, I wonder why that woman from Pakistan who's older than me has a different opinion on this. So you can ask that next level question. Those are all things that I think impact not just our relationships and not just the connective tissue in our communities, but I think that impacts in terms of how society functions and how places like the United States continue to survive and thrive, because we lose that, again, that unique curiosity of, I wonder why he thinks that's the best solution. I wonder why she approaches it this way. That's a big loss, and I would never have connected the dots to slang. Give us one final thought that you hope everybody thinks a little differently when it comes to slang coming out of this.
Well, I should make it clear that I think it's fun to learn new slang on social media and try it out. I should also be honest and say that when I see a person in their 40s saying that something is, lit, or use the construction it's giving or whatever, I do think less of them. So I think on the one hand, the sort of standardization of slang is being driven by all of our shared and understandable desire to seem young and hip, when in fact most of us are not young or hip. And I think the more positive way to look at that is how we say it says more than what we say. And I think it's always worth thinking about how we're saying stuff, both because it's fun and because it can make us more conscious of what we're conveying to other people.
That is a great think again moment. So it's time for us to think again about what we think we know when it comes to slang and what all of us are doing on social media. Fantastic stuff. Brilliant writing, fantastic piece in The Atlantic. Dan Brooks is a writer based in Missoula, Montana. And Dan, thanks so much for sharing that and providing some additional depth and questions for us today. We really appreciate you joining us on the show.
Thanks, Boyd. I appreciate being on.
All right, that is some fantastic stuff. I'm going to go back and reread Dan's piece at The Atlantic, theatlantic.com. It's called Social Media Broke Slang. Now we all speak phone. It is fascinating. There are great questions, some real good stuff to think again about and get real curious. We're going to come back. One more segment coming up. Stick around.
Hey everyone, it's Ted from Consumer Cellular, the guy in the orange sweater, and this is your wake-up call. If you're paying too much for wireless service, you don't have to keep having that nightmare. Consumer Cellular has the same fast, reliable coverage as the leading carriers for up to half the cost. So why keep spending more than you have to? Seriously, wake up! and call 1-888-FREEDOM or visit consumercellular.com.
Savings based on cost of Consumer Cellular's single line 1, 5, and 10 gig data plans with unlimited talk and text compared to lowest cost single line postpaid unlimited talk, text, and data plans offered by T-Mobile and Verizon January 2024.
When you use Bounce dryer sheets and your clothes look amazing, it's the sheet. Less static in your life? Yeah, it's the sheet. Smelling fresher than ever? It's the sheet. Oh, so soft fabric? Ooh la la. It's the sheet. Less wrinkles on your clothes? You know it's the sheet. Bounce dryer sheets. More freshness, more softness. Less static, less wrinkles. It's the sheet.
Join the Greenhouse Show and Olson's Greenhouse June 29th from the Hidden Garden Tour. Get an exclusive peek at Olson's Gardens at 350 West, 200 South, Santaquin. Visit hiddengarden.org.
This Friday, join KSL News Radio and NPS from 10 to 1 as the movie show stops by. Then, browse and uncover what makes NPS so great. With 4 locations, NPS takes a new inventory every day. Then, they check all competitors' retail pricing before marking items down 20 to 70% off. You're invited to visit the movie show this Friday from 10 to 1. And that's the first step to discovering NPS. Visit npsstore.com to begin your own NPS adventure. npsstore.com.
911, what's your emergency? Someone on the other line said they kidnapped my son.
On September 12, 1995, McKay Everett disappeared from his home in Conroe, Texas.
There was no sign of forced entry. It was just as if McKay had walked out of his own free will.
And to this day, McKay's mother, Paulette, feels that justice was never truly served. Ransom is available now. Listen at ransompodcast.com or wherever you get your podcasts.
Emergency traffic on KSL News Radio, brought to you by Sinclair's Dino Pay app. Save up to 20 cents per gallon. We have a multiple vehicle crash with possible injuries on southbound I-15 just after 33rd South. Right now, at least 2 right lanes of traffic are blocked, and we have a lot of vehicles involved, including a tractor trailer and another type of big construction vehicle. Right lanes blocked, and delays are starting to set up very, very quickly. If this is your normal route home, you want to consider an alternate route before leaving the workday. It may take a while for this crash to be cleared out of the way. Again, it's southbound I-15 after 33rd South, right lanes blocked. Ricky Meese in the KSL Traffic Center.
And I said to myself, sit down, you're rocking the boat.
Join Utah Festival Opera and Musical Theater July 5th through August 3rd for show-stopping performances in Logan. Professional performers from Broadway and all over bring you Andrew Lloyd Webber's Cats, the lively classic Guys and Dolls, the hilarious Anything Goes with spectacular tap dancing and music by Cole Porter, cult classic Little Shop of Horrors, and Puccini's opera Gianni Schicchi with its sequel Buoso's Ghost. Stop the commercial! I'm interrupting myself to tell you that Utah students K-12 can get a free ticket to all Utah Festival performances this summer. Claim yours online now. Where was I? Oh, yeah. Cult classic Little Shop of Horrors and Puccini's opera Gianni Schicchi with its sequel Buoso's Ghost. Plus, late-night cabarets, 5 concerts, breakfast with the stars, academy classes, and more. Tickets at utahfestival.org. utahfestival.org.
With almost 9,000 reviews on Google and countless before and after pictures and videos, SodaWeightLoss.com has helped people turn their lives around, get off the medications, and stay healthy for the rest of their life. Like Nick, who let go of 42 pounds in 5 weeks.
Before this, I was pre-diabetic. I had high cholesterol and acid reflux. And when I went to the doctor last week, I had none of those things. She took me off all of my medicines.
It's been almost a year since my doctor told me I was type 2 diabetic, which was a real sobering moment. But as it turns out, the wake-up call I'd been needing. He put me on medication, but said it was still early enough to be reversed if I made some life changes. With the help and encouragement of Soda's amazing nutritionists and dietitians, I let go of 70 pounds in 5 months. Now I finally like how I look, but more importantly, I'm no longer diabetic, and even my sleep apnea has dramatically improved. Don't wait anymore. Go to SodaWeightLoss.com to get started. SOTA weightloss.com. Soda stands for, say it with me, state of the art.
Utah, you love the summers, so don't spend it painting. Do what Mike did. He called Rhino Shield.
Our home is basically a contemporary with stucco finish, and we just started noticing that the paint was just fading and the stucco would just look like garbage. We had received a postcard from Rhino Shield, and we decided to take a look at it.
Rhino Shield ceramic technology is formulated for our unique climate here in Utah and is Class 1 fire rated.
The process with Rhino Shield and their crew, they were just very conscientious. We had problems in the past with painters. They leave debris and everything. Well, we didn't have that with Rhino Shield.
You too can get the guaranteed protection of Rhino Shield right now for 10% off the regular price.
The thing about Rhino Shield, the heat gain has been reduced, and we save $70 a month. You don't hear that about any type of paint.
Remember, Utah, this is a limited time offer, so call now, 435-246-4466 or rhinoshieldwest.com. That's rhinoshieldwest.com.
Go Rhino Shield.
Getting help with plumbing repairs is easier than you think. All you have to do is call Any Hour Services or schedule an appointment at anyhourservices.com. No one helps more homeowners than Any Hour Services.
With the 3 things you need to know this hour, I'm Dan Bomas. First, voter numbers in Utah County were lagging behind the rest of the state yesterday. Then 14,000 ballots arrived last night. Second, an election worker in Phoenix was arrested for stealing a key to vote tabulation machines. And third, while a ceasefire proposal to end the fighting in Gaza is on the table, rocket attacks in northern Israel are heating up. 97 degrees, partly cloudy in Salt Lake City. And back to Inside Sources on KSL News Radio.
Get deeper insights on the news from Inside Sources.
Welcome back to Inside Sources here on KSL News Radio. Great to be with you today, as always. I am Boyd Matheson. We may dub this final segment the Arsonist Firefighter, at least a portion of it, because we want to dig in to something we've called out some of the challenges that came out of the pandemic. And one of the arsonist firefighter situations, in other words, you create the problem and then you solve the problem and take credit for solving the problem, has come with the big payments that went out during COVID. Things that were supposed to help businesses, things that were supposed to help employees kind of weather their way through lockdowns and shutdowns and all of those things. Well, the IRS has come to the rescue because they've now identified that there was a whole lot of fraud and shenanigans going on with funds that they were responsible for. The IRS has estimated that between 60% and 70% of the claims that were made show unacceptable levels of risk, which means, in plain English, that there is a high probability that there was fraud with 70% of the applications that they processed. And that adds up to a lot of money. Really interesting. The agency announced that its voluntary disclosure program, which is how all of these funds were moved about, that they had recovered $1 billion and then raised that to they've actually recovered $2 billion of improper payouts. Now, if they've caught $2 billion of it, that means there's still a lot more out there that they didn't catch or that they didn't track down or that they didn't get back. And that's your money. That's my money. That's taxpayer money. So this is one of those examples of what happens, one of the negative ramifications of what happens when government, especially at the federal level, just starts spreading cash all over the place. It is just ripe for waste, fraud, and abuse, particularly fraud. By the end of May, the IRS had initiated 450 criminal cases. And in those criminal cases, there's upwards of $7 billion that was taken by fraud. Now, that's not the only place within the government where there was fraud. Remember that it was just back in April, Attorney General Merrick Garland boasted that their task force, and our good friend J.D. Tachili, who writes for Reason.com, pointed this out in a really powerful way. You can check out his piece at Reason.com today. But the Attorney General boasted that their task force had charged more than 3,500 defendants and seized over $1.4 billion in stolen relief funds, and that they'd filed well over 400 lawsuits in the process. So the numbers just keep adding up, and it's a cautionary tale. And the tale is that when we look to government to just solve everything and to solve it by throwing money at it, it doesn't end well. And it especially doesn't end well for you and me. Because here's what we know on the back end of all the things. And granted, it was an uncertain time. It was an unprecedented, historic time in terms of what was going on. But that doesn't excuse anybody or anything. There still has to be accountability. And, as we talked about earlier in the show, there is also the absolute predictability of consequences. And so all of the waste and fraud and abuse of many of the funds that went out during the pandemic fueled inflation that we're all still paying for today. In fact, you all paid for it today. If you went to the store today, you paid for it. If you went to the gas pump, you paid for it. If you bought a good or a service, you paid for it. Because the government's own statistics, the Bureau of Labor Statistics, their own inflation counter, so this is the government's inflation counter, says that today it takes $124.77 to purchase what you could have purchased for $100 before the pandemic. So a lot of these stimulus programs where, again, a lot of this fraud took place, where trillions of dollars went to all the wrong people, in all the wrong ways, in all the wrong places, that's costing you. And for whatever you purchased for $100 before the pandemic, you're paying $124.77 today. And that is our perfect example of the absolute predictability of consequences. And we always have to be careful of the arsonist who is a firefighter. And far too often, we have this big government spending and the fraud that comes behind it, and then they rush in and say, look, we caught some of the fraudsters. We reclaimed some of the trillions of dollars that went out that did foster a lot of the inflation that we're still dealing with today, that did cost us as taxpayers, because that's money that didn't get spent on other things that we need in government, the actual jobs they need to do. So as a cautionary tale, check it out at Reason.com. Our good friend J.D. Tuchili, who couldn't join us this week, but we always enjoy his perspective. This is some really great under-the-hood stuff when it comes to government spending and what happens when you don't have the right disciplines, the right checks and balances in place. No matter how noble the goal or how good it sounds, there is the absolute predictability of consequences. Well, today is Election Day here in the state of Utah, primary election. You still have an opportunity to get out and vote today. Make sure you make your voice heard. Your vote counts. And we've got you covered here at KSL News Radio throughout the day. We'll hand it over to our good friend Jeff Kaplan, and then Jeff Kaplan and I and Morgan Lyon-Cotty will join you tonight, give you all the results, all the breakdowns of primary election day here in the state of Utah. And that wraps it up for Inside Sources. So for now, as you go out into the world, make sure you see something that inspires, say something that uplifts, and do something that makes a difference. And we'll catch you again real soon. Jeff, over to you.
KSL FM Midvale.
KSL Salt Lake City.
From the KSL.
Good afternoon.